Hello, welcome again to Sport Unlocked, going through all the week's sports news with Martyn Ziegler from The Times, Tariq Panja from The New York Times, and myself, Rob Harris from Sky News. And we always welcome your contributions, sportunlockpod@gmail.com or at Sport Unlocked. Direct message us on all the social platforms. And we've had a question in.
Oh, this sounds just the sort of thing we want. Hit me with it.
It's not abuse. It's from Matt Graham, who says, "Hi, great show. Always will want to hear. Do you think there's any risk that the 2026 World Cup is only in Canada and Mexico? If one of the three countries is fully supporting Russia's invasion of Ukraine while talking about annexing one of the other three countries, how could the World Cup be hosted by all three countries?"
Good question. I think it's more likely it might only be hosted by the USA rather than only by Canada and Mexico.
Has Gianni Infantino been to Mexico or Canada in the years since these countries have been awarded World Cup? There's a question for you there. And thank you, Matt, for sending the question in. When are we going to do the massive mailbag full of negative comments? Is that for another week? We finally got a positive comment there.
Yeah, it helps to get a sense of what the audience think. I think there often has been that perception that one of the three might be knocked out of contention, but it wouldn't be the US that would suddenly be toppled from the hosting.
Perhaps they could replace Canada, or Canada gets taken over as a 51st state, so that becomes part of the hosting thing, and Greenland replaces Mexico.
It's actually a good question and timely question as well, because this week we've had the teams qualifying for the World Cup. I think the second or third team to qualify is the Islamic Republic of Iran. Now, when that draw happens, guys, is it likely or unlikely the ball containing Iran will be extremely hot or extremely cold, thereby figuring out a way of getting this country to play its group games in either Canada or Mexico? I mean, right now, with everything that's happening, the idea of Iran playing its group games in the United States of America seems quite unlikely.
Maybe less conspiratorial ways of achieving that. If you split the draw, so you're already predetermined where some of the groups might play their matches, so you complete groups that will never actually play in the United States, perhaps.
Yeah, you can achieve that. The European draws are organised, World Cup draws are organised to keep countries apart, aren't they?
Yeah, but the World Cup is to bring football together, is one of the slogans, isn't it? It's football unites the world. In the United States, Gianni Infantino has said this. And the other part of this is if any of these teams do well, however hard you try and separate them, the end of the knockout stages, almost all of them, are in the US.
And there was a memo reported fairly recently about Iran being amongst 41 countries that could face partial or complete bans on citizens entering the US. And even if the Iranian national team doesn't get drawn for its group stage games in the US, well, surely any Iranian fans got every right to be in the US to watch other matches under the terms of the World Cup hosting agreement.
Well, they don't have any rights at all. So FIFA has made it clear here, no fans do. Buying a ticket does not guarantee you a right to go to the World Cup. So in Qatar and I think Russia as well, your ticket acted as a visa effectively to enter the country. The US and Canada and Mexico for this World Cup, that offer hasn't been made, and I doubt it will be made. We're only 18 months away from this, and we will be talking about visa and immigration issues, I think, quite a lot as it nears.
Maybe a lot of Iranian fans want to go to the US for the Club World Cup this summer.
Why wouldn't they? Because, it's this brand new tournament we've talked about a lot. Some of the biggest clubs in the world taking part, some of the biggest clubs in the world not taking part. So it'll be an interesting one, but there has been some news this week on this.
Well, we now know just how lucrative this competition could be because the prize money will be up to $125 million for one team.
It's enormous, isn't it? This is literally 1 month's work as well. When you consider clubs playing entire seasons in the biggest leagues in the world don't earn anything like this, it is a remarkable amount.
Well, they do earn more than it if they win the Premier League or the Champions League.
7 months competitions. This is the only equivalent I can think of is something like the IPL in cricket or something, which goes on for about 8 weeks. But this this is 4 weeks' work. So per game, it's huge.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it was almost essential for FIFA to offer huge sums to get to the big European clubs in order to make it more attractive in the future, as well as making ensuring that they try their very hardest to win this. It was vital that happened. And should we just break down? So, if you're a European club, your participation fee before you've actually sort of kicked a ball is based between $12.8 million and $38.2 million. And that is varies depending on your ranking. It doesn't say what the ranking actually is, but it says determined by sporting and commercial criteria. So it'll be interesting to see how that works out. But I would be amazed if Real Madrid doesn't appear at the very top of that.
But look at the other end of the scale for the participation fee for the team from Oceania earning $3.58 million. Well, it might not seem that much compared to the potential European entry fee of $38 million, but that's a huge amount for Auckland City, isn't it?
It's huge. It's huge. Now, so much so that when they go back to Auckland, these coffers will allow them to dominate their league. And this is the problem of this for me. So this tournament is every 4 years. These 32 teams are here now. The amount of money that is going to be sprayed around into the coffers of each of these teams, wherever they are in their regions, whether it's in South America, for example, South America, participation amount of 15 million for each of those teams, North American, Caribbean, 9.5, same for Asia and same for Africa. That amount is really significant. So when they go back, they're going to have a leg up on all of their rival teams. And we've seen it with the Champions League. The risk is that these payments kind of solidify these teams at the top and reduce competition. Now, if I'm thinking FIFA as the governing body of football is to increase the health of the global game, I'm not sure creating this type of polarization is the mission of FIFA.
No, we have talked about this as a big risk. For example, the South African team is playing in this.
Mamelodi Sundowns.
Correct. So this, I think, what they will earn from participating in this tournament, especially if they win a group match, will probably be equivalent to their entire annual revenue. So you're basically doubling your entire annual revenue just by going to this tournament. If you look at one of the African clubs taking part, Mamelodi Sundowns, their annual revenue is $6.9 million US. So this isn't just going to be equivalent to their annual revenue. It could be double their annual revenue just from playing this tournament. And what does that mean for all their other rivals in the South African Premier League?
Something for the CAF president to think about. Who is the CAF president?
Is he somehow connected to Mamelodi Sundowns?
Possibly.
And for Auckland City, it does more than treble their revenue from last year. And then just running down the rest of the numbers, if you go out in the group stage, you get an extra 2 million per club. The round of 16, 7.5 million per club. The quarterfinals, 13 million or so per club. The semi-finals, 21 million per club. And for a finalist, an additional 30 million per club. And the winner gets 40 million US dollars on top of that participation fee, which is how we reach that huge amount if you're from Europe.
Just to get into that 120 top end again, I was looking at the domestic distributions for the big leagues. To take the Premier League out, because the $125 million won't match domestic. Actually, it might, the television income for the top Premier League teams. But certainly, I looked at Serie A with the top earners were Inter Milan, Juventus, and AC Milan in 2024 with their domestic broadcasting distribution. This is way more than they get. All of those teams, and even in Bundesliga, Bayern Munich playing an entire season in Germany from the German TV rights, who are in this tournament, wouldn't get anything like this. It will create these fissures, and then we've got 4 years to wait until the next tournament. So my question to you guys is, will there be pressure then from clubs who aren't here, Barcelona, Liverpool, for example, Manchester United, because it's merit-based and performance-based, they didn't make it, to not have a tournament every 4 years, but one more regular, because all this money is at stake? And will that change football moving forward?
And that urgent need to qualify for the tournament as well by winning the Champions League in Europe, or indeed getting that high coefficient as well. It will take on a different dimension winning the Champions League if you can get into this Club World Cup. But I suppose obviously that existing pathway exists, that you do have to still focus on domestic success to qualify through the league into Europe, for example.
Yeah, only a matter of time before the biennial Club World Cup is put forward by a interested national association.
It's not just to criticise FIFA on this. FIFA were bounced into this, and we kind of mentioned, but we should just. This is the European clubs also putting a huge amount of pressure on FIFA for these enormous cash prizes here. And this is the deal they have with the European Club Association. So these European clubs have demanded so much, and there was a lot of hand-wringing about how to do it. And this is why the sporting pillar is almost 50% of this. Your performance will guarantee a higher amount of money, which I suppose is fair. But it is the pressure from the clubs that has led to this. Hence that strange deal we discussed in earlier pods with DAZN paying however much was it, billion? Was it $1 billion for the TV rights, when the rest of the market wasn't willing to pay 500 million because they have to pay this money out?
And then DAZN received that injection of investment from Saudi Arabia as well.
Funny that, about the same amount. Funny.
And FIFA are saying there will be $250 million provided to club football across the world additionally. That in a statement from Gianni Infantino. It's been a week since the election of Kirsty Coventry. She went home to Zimbabwe, quite a welcome for her. But the focus this week shifted to one of her beaten rivals, Sebastian Coe, who was back on World Athletics duties, holding a press conference and making quite a notable announcement, signalling the return of sex testing, although World Athletics don't want to be seen as sex testing in that terms of that terminology.
Look, the pre-clearance testing will be for athletes to be able to compete in the female category. The process is very straightforward, frankly, very clear, and it's an important one. And the test will only need to be done once in the career life of an athlete. So neither of these are invasive. They are necessary, and they will be done to absolutely international medical standards. It's important to do it because it maintains everything that we've been talking about, and particularly recently, about not just talking about the integrity of female women's sport, but actually guaranteeing it. And this, we feel, is a really important way of providing confidence and maintaining that absolute focus on the integrity of competition. I wouldn't have set off down this path in 2016, 2017 to protect the female category in sport if I'd been sort of, anything other than prepared to take, the challenge head on. We've been to the Court of Arbitration on our DSD regulations. They've been upheld. And they've again been upheld after appeal. So we will doggedly protect the female category, and we'll do whatever is necessary to do it.
Basically, this is taking a cheek swab, which will be a DNA test, basically to look at the chromosomes for each athlete. So this will avoid the sort of humiliating procedure that, for example, Kata Semenya had to go through.
Yes, they're saying the test will look for the presence of the SRY gene on the Y chromosome, but they could also use a dried blood spot test to assess testosterone levels. But one group of scientists did contact me to say they fear that there still could potentially be more intrusive tests, physical tests, if they can't determine a precise result from the testing. Now, During the whole Olympics last year, the IOC kept on saying they don't want to return to the bad days of sex testing. It existed from the Mexico Olympics until being stopped before the Sydney Games in 2000. So it was in place for around 3 decades. But Kirsty Coventry, the incoming IOC president, when I asked her about it last week, didn't use the same language. She talked about a task force and looking into the whole issue more broadly, while also saying that there are some sports like equestrian where she believes there wouldn't be an advantage if you were a transgender woman, a person with differences of sex development who was competing in the women's category.
So in those sports, Rob, I mean, this is a debate for another time. Just have an open category if there is there is no difference. But the question, the big picture here, though, is you can correct me if I'm wrong here, every female athlete that takes part in track and field events under World Athletics will have to have at least one of these tests. Is that correct?
That's it. And at the meeting, they did also tighten the rules. So 2 years ago, World Athletics introduced this ban on transgender women competing in women's sports, saying that you had to be assigned female at birth and having not gone through male puberty. Now they've made clear that also that will apply to athletes with DSD. So ensuring that anyone who might have had any form of male puberty, any raised testosterone, will be excluded as well. Nothing like testosterone suppressants can be taken.
Yeah, this was a big issue for World Athletics in the Rio Olympics, in some of the middle distance women's events, where certainly in one of them it was suggested that all 3 of the medalists were athletes with differences of sexual development, and I think that caused a lot of upset amongst their competitors, and that's something that Coe's had to sort of deal with, and he certainly has taken the side of looking very much at the biological side of things.
800 meters, I think, the 800 meters in Rio de Janeiro, you're right there, with all 3. It seems, athletics or track and field, wherever you might be listening, however you refer to it, seems to be like the center of all of this. Are there other sports that have had these DSD questions?
Well, World Rowing recently did introduce its own ban on transgender women competing in women's sports. And I think what World Athletics have addressed is, if you aren't going to have this policy, how do you assess for gender verification? There is a concern that you end up doing it based on suspicion. So there's an argument, if you don't have a blanket testing system, that it leads potentially to people being singled out based on physical appearances to undergo testing.
I think it definitely needed to move away from those bad old days of sort of physical inspections, which are like horrible. Just to say, boxing obviously had a big issue during the Paris Olympics with a couple of fighters. There were questions whether they had differences of sexual development as well. The IBA, the sort of unofficial, well, not unofficial, the sort of de-recognised boxing organisation said it had tested them and that actually they were biological male, and that caused an absolute furore, of course.
On a broader point, Sebastian Coe has taken a lead on this. Does this give us a sign of how he might now be leading World Athletics, knowing he will never become IOC president, and just what a figure he could be in world sport? Well, he was very clear not to criticise Kirsty Coventry or indeed the process directly at the end of the IOC session in Greece.
This was always part of his policy. I think it was been clear about that for years.
Well, we're still waiting in the world of football for the Manchester City verdict. How long have we been waiting for now? Well, the case that started in 2018 with the football leagues being published finally reached the Premier League hearing stage last year, and it's been concluded. We're still waiting for the findings now, but little bits of information being analysed in the meantime, particularly from that previous UEFA ruling in 2020 when City were previously banned from the Champions League before it was overturned a few months later after various allegations were found to be time barred.
Yeah, there's a sort of interesting development. A couple of years ago, I did a story which was following a YouTube documentary about the Manchester City case, and that saw a UEFA's initial report to its club financial control body, which said that one of the sponsorship deals with Etisalat had been paid for by a Middle East finance fixer called Jabbar Mohammed. Now, The Athletic have just reported that he actually worked in the Crown Prince of Abu Dhabi's office, which at the time I remember seeing that was a possibility, but there was somebody else also with the same name who also worked in Abu Dhabi finance. But I suppose they say this is quite significant because they've got pictures from his Instagram account of him with Manchester City players.
Hiding in plain sight, one would say. But in terms of this comes from the UEFA adjudicatory report, right? And it just goes to show what happened at CAS. This is the one where the UEFA Financial Fair Play Task Force, whatever you want to call this thing, control body, thought in their mind, City were bang to right. City deny all allegations and say this is all wrong, of course. And the only way they seem to have managed to swerve this, reading the CAS document, is this is the time barred stuff. Even if all of this is true, the CAS panelists decided, sorry, we can't consider it because of the time bar. And to be clear, if this same evidence comes before the Premier League and it is found to be true, there is no time bar in the Premier League process.
Yes, that is basically correct. The Regulatory Commission should be able to judge this without any sort of time bar matter.
Yeah, but City, of course, if you were to believe the email, certainly at the UEFA time, would have spent 30 million on the 50 best lawyers to get through these processes they find, and that was for the UEFA one. So presumably, the very expensive legal team they have got on their side here, they've put together, will obviously work to figure out a way to get through this process as well. So there's no guarantee that, because there is no time bar, the Premier League can make this work. City have extremely good lawyers, so much so the fans have got banners out in the stadium celebrating one of them.
One of the strands of the case is relating to whether there were any side payments for Roberto Mancini when he was manager, in terms of whether he was earning more from a Sheikh Mansour related club in the UAE than his main Manchester City salary, something that was previously reported on by football leagues. We have in recent months had a similar case in the United States, because Angel City from the National Women's Soccer League were fined $200,000, docked 3 points, and saw 2 senior officials suspended from any duties relating to player transactions for the rest of the season, all over a breach of the salary cap by $50,000. Now, what the investigation found was that there were side letters with 5 players who'd signed that weren't disclosed to the league, and those increased players' pay and benefits beyond their standard contracts, which meant they exceeded the salary cap.
So that's a league enforcing its rules, and it shows it can happen.
Just obviously, it happened in rugby union in England. Famously, Saracens were actually demoted as a result of that.
So this week, I had a chance to speak to the Angel City president and CEO, Julie Ehrman. She was at the Women in Football conference, and we went on to talk about the growth of the club as well. But let's just hear what she said when I asked her about this suspension.
Look, yeah, that was a really frustrating time. The rules in the NWSL are unclear, and we ended up on the wrong side of it. We've learned a lot from it. We put in new processes and procedures. It won't happen again, but it's not going to stop us from challenging the league. It's not going to stop us from trying to push for pay equity for the players. It's not going to stop us from investing in the experience. We just want to make sure we do it on the right side of the rules.
An interesting team, this, isn't it, Tariq?
Oh, it's a remarkable story, this, just from a financial point of view. I'll be honest, I haven't seen a single second of Angel City's football, but I have heard of them, because this is essentially a kind of celebrity-owned vehicle. Owners, when they first kicked off, included the actress Natalie Portman, Alex Ohanian, who is the venture capitalist. I think he's the founder of Reddit, or investor in Reddit. husband of Serena Williams, who's also an investor, Jennifer Garner, Eva Longoria. It goes on and on.
Hey, maybe he could help out, because I did try and register sport on Locked on Reddit and we seem to get banned. I must have registered in the wrong way.
So there you go. However, the thing that I find incredible, this club is four and a bit years old. Most recent investment round, Bob Iger, the CEO of Disney, if he's still there or not, I'm not sure, but Bob Iger of Disney invested about 50 million, valuing this business at $300 million. That is remarkable. The article I've pulled describes that as a spicy valuation, or maybe nuts.
Or maybe nuts indeed. I mean, when you obviously that's a huge amount of money, but actually, when you see what the players are actually getting paid, it's actually very, very small potatoes. If you look at the scale of the breach, $50,000. Obviously, if you compare that to what many Premier League footballers are getting, that's a sort of a day's pay. But and actually, Angel City argue that at least some of the discrepancy was due to payments for childcare, because a couple of the players have young children and they basically they're not even enough to cover their childcare costs.
And it all brings us back full circle to how we started the pod, which is about potential competitive advantages of certain teams, but particularly in the women's game, where there's obviously encouragement to raise the level of salaries. How do you do so well, but maintaining a competitive advantage? Perhaps you don't have one team running away with it. Well, of course, it is a noble ethos to try to ensure female players are paid more, given the huge disparities in the game. And it's interesting, actually, that their valuation has grown despite no real sign of success yet on the pitch. Their season's record 8th, 5th, 12th, and 8th.
Look, it's about building an authentic connection with your fan base. Angel City is about using entertainment and sport to drive to equity and having a meaningful impact in our community. We do over 200 events a year. We let people know why we exist, how we can work together, and then we put on an incredible game day experience. When you come to an Angel City match, you leave having a good time, whether you won or lost. We prefer winning. It's way more fun, but you're creating an experience that people want to go to. And that's was done very clearly by just investing in the product, in the players, in the experience, in the community.
Because you're getting the buzz, the crowds that perhaps not even European clubs are getting at this stage in the women's game. So what can they take away from how you've achieved this so quickly?
Look, again, it starts with investment. What is the type of game day experience I want as a fan? I want it sold out. I want people cheering. I want smoke. I want flags. I want chants. So we went to create that experience, and that meant investing in the entertainment, the signage, the hospitality. So you felt like you were being taken care of. And then we also created an environment that was inclusive and diverse, where you knew you could create community.
At times it can seem like the women's game is quite dominated around the international game. The World Cups get those big audiences. Do you think you're showing how the club game itself has a key role to play in the women's game and can actually be a key part of the growth rather than being so international focused?
Look, we were intentional about building a global brand from the beginning. We've sold merch in over 53 countries. We've had fans from all 50 states. We've told our story on the global landscape, and we've developed fans. It's the same way that people always say only 1% of Liverpool fans have ever been to a match. Well, we're trying to create that same environment. We want you to become a fan of Angel City. We want you to come to a match when you're in LA. And if you're not, we want you to watch it on TV. And we're going to do everything we can to make sure that you can watch our games anywhere in the world.
So what's the growth that you hope for? I mean, do you think the global governing bodies are doing enough?
I think it's so much better. The prize money in women's football is growing. We see the Women's FIFA Club World Cup, which is going to come out in 2028, which is going to be incredible. On the heels of the World Cup that's going to be in Brazil, we're going to have the Club World Cup. Then we're going to have the Olympics in Los Angeles. There's a lot of investment now happening in women's football. We saw the transfer market this year grow to $15.6 million. So the players are deserving of the dollars. The fans are excited and they're investing in the product. In the NWSL, we just had an expansion team be bought for $110 million. Angel City paid $2 million. So the fans are there, the investment is there, and it's growing a lot faster than I think any of us anticipated.
I think the story with them, though, is that this is more a entertainment vehicle than a sports team. They've got the TV shows on streaming channels and issues like that. And well, let's see how they go on.
The story I've sort of spent most time working on this week is about the £2.3 billion that Roman Abramovich received for the sale of Chelsea, which has been frozen for nearly 3 years in his company's bank account because he's been sanctioned. The idea was this should go to help the victims of the war in Ukraine, but there's growing concerns, I think, that whether this money will ever actually reach Ukraine victims because it's stuck there. The Foreign Office have issued a new statement saying it's a legally complex case. And the former sports minister, Richard Cabourn, has written to Keir Starmer saying, what happens if the sanctions are lifted? There's a peace deal. What happens to that money then?
I was thinking just this as peace talks are going. Of course, everyone wants peace in between Ukraine, Russia, everywhere else in the world. But in terms of these sanctioned individuals, and should they be lifted, that money presumably is this guy's. But also, don't forget, Abramovich was type of persona non grata well before the war. If you remember, the British government were not renewing his visa after 2018. That's what stalled and ultimately collapsed his Colosseum-style stadium project for Chelsea. It's going to be interesting. I can't imagine that Britain will welcome the guy back here. But if the sanctions are lifted, question marks over that money, are there, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, I had a word with Paul Heegren, the accountant, who is the secretary of Fordstam Limited, Abramovich's company.
You found him.
I managed to track him down. Yeah. Had a quick chat. He's basically said that he's not involved with any of the decisions about the distribution. He's just does the administration and the accounts. But he did say it's operating under these sanctions is very difficult and time consuming.
Yeah, I wonder if he's getting paid.
Well, that's a very good question. He can't. Will he be getting paid from the company accounts? I'm not sure.
Yeah, so
I think a small amount of money is going, for example, to this Mike Penrose, the former UNICEF ambassador, who is trying to set up this foundation and has been working on it for nearly 3 years. So maybe a small amount of money for salaries is permitted to be released.
From what you've just said there, though, I must say this kind of language from the Foreign Office, legally complex. It's really frustrating because it gives no clarity. It's just one word after another. Yeah, and as if I have no idea what to make of that. Like, why is it legally complex? I wish someone would tell us what the complexities are here, because it is like groping in the dark to figure this out. This would be one of the biggest, if not the biggest, charity payments in the world should 2.5 billion be released.
Obviously, it's the Labour government inheriting this from the Conservatives who imposed the sanctions at the start of the war in 2022. And it does raise questions about the sanctioning process, how open they are, how complex they are. I'm sure they never factored in having to sell a football club, which won't be easy. And a club has to stay continuing in operations. It has to stay viable. Although if you think back to that period in 2022 when they were stopped from selling merchandise and even match programs just to do the bare minimum you had to do to keep the club going as they searched for new owners. But could it have been put in some sort of trust as the war continued, delaying a sale until after then? Well, then you've got to have people to make the decisions. You have to judge, is it just about the club existing or trying to be competitive and challenging for titles still and beating rivals, whilst it would be under some sort of state ownership. But we also didn't know how long the war could go on for. It's still ongoing now after 3 years. The fact the annexation of Crimea happened in 2014 and we're now in 2025, 3 years into the full-scale invasion. And you can see how the government needs to protect themselves so they don't hand out the cash too hastily. And there's some challenges down the line with Roman Abramovich disputing how the process was played out and how the cash was handed out as well. And as for Abramovich, he's been pretty quiet, hasn't he, the last 3 years, really, since those opening weeks of the war when there were some various briefings that were put out. So just when will the 2 billion plus be used to help the people of Ukraine? Will it ever?
Another saga that's been dragging on a long time. Do you remember the case of the 23 Chinese swimmers?
How can I forget? Yes, the ones that WADA decided they'd all been contaminated with the same sort of heart medication.
Well, the ones that WADA agreed had with the Chinese that they had somehow managed to eat heart medication in their meals a few months before the Tokyo Olympics. Those ones. Now, WADA this week has announced that there is going to be new rules on contamination, because contamination, as a result of the Chinese case and the fallout, contamination is very, very possible now, more because of the lab sensitivities and things like that. Now, WADA's case with the Chinese was their scientists said, we find this very hard to believe, that WADA's own scientists, but we can't disprove what they're saying is true. Now, if WADA were to change the contamination rules, if I'm a lawyer acting for any athlete that's passed or failed a drugs test, I'm going to be screaming, hey, contamination, burrito, beef burger, noodles, someone breathed on me the wrong way, I'm contaminated. You try and disprove this. I asked WADA's president banker this week and CEO Olivier Nigli, and they said, yeah, there is every chance this could be the case. But at the moment, the risk of athletes who have been contaminated being wrongfully banned is also there. So there's a balance to strike. But really, we're going to see a contamination bonanza here.
God, contamination overload. If you look at it cynically, that is the end result of what WADA has had to do after mishandling this.
And it's all about how much confidence anyone can have in the sport they're watching. Can they really believe that the sport is clean? Maybe some of these places are hoping that we lose interest. When we're between Olympics, more than 3 years until LA, these types of issues can drop off the agenda. But they stay on our agenda, and we have had 2 pods in the last week. If you haven't heard our Sepp Blatter, Michel Platini one from during the week, you can still, of course, listen to it as you can all previous 190 episodes of Sport Unlocked. And as ever, we're grateful for your feedback as we started the episode with a listener question. sportunlockedpod@gmail.com and at Sport Unlocked on any social platform. I think most. As ever, thank you for listening. Goodbye for now.